Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I seem to have a knack for finding these cheap guitars on Facebook Marketplace, but this is a Epiphone Les Paul Special 2. It's a little bit different kind of a model. It's kind of that Guns N' Roses slash model, and I think it's called the AFD, so I think that stands for Appetite for Destruction, at least one would assume. This one, the kid that owned it didn't play it a whole lot, but it is a little bit dirty. The strings that he put on it, he strung it backwards, or wound it backwards I should say, so I've got to fix that. The pickup heights are wrong, the bridge height is wrong, and I'm not sure about the neck relief, but it's got a few little issues that I need to correct, so I think I'll just go ahead and do that as a video today. So I think where I'm going to start, because this thing needs a good cleaning, at least on the top here, is I'm going to take the strings off first. Then I'll get them put back on and wound the right direction, and then we'll be able to start taking some measurements. On a Gibson style guitar like this with a stop bar tailpiece, you can actually loosen all the strings at the headstock, take them out of the tuners, leave them in the tailpiece itself, and set everything all aside in one piece. So that's how I'm going to do this. Alright, well, it's ready for some cleanup, so I'll start with that. Since the bridge height is off anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and remove the bridge posts, and we'll set those back later. On a lot of cleaning jobs, I just use ordinary Windex. It doesn't react with any of these poly finishes, so it's just fine for this purpose. Just a quick note, there's some kind of a little fiber or something that's stuck in the original finish here. It's definitely under where it's been polished into the finish. It's like a little red fiber. And over here there's also a little finish flaw. Now there's another little red fiber up here. I'm wondering if this was maybe like a factory second or something. I'm not sure if these things would have had that cheap of a finish to start with, but maybe they would. I think they were only like 100 or 200 bucks new, something like that. Well, I don't know the history of this model very well. I think it's still being sold. This one is a 2021. I don't know what kind of wood this is on the fretboard itself. It does not look like rosewood to me. It's probably some kind of a baked maple or something like that. It looks that way. I'm going to go ahead and oil it though, because it is unfinished wood. So to oil this thing, I've got some quadruple aught steel wool and a little bit of lemon oil. I'm going to go light on this and just give it a quick wipe down, just to kind of give the frets a slight shine and also raise any dirt that might be in the fretboard out. Mostly what I see looks like maybe hints of polishing compound or something, not really much dirt. I will wipe off any excess because I just don't want it to soak in. I'm not real sure what kind of wood this is, and lemon oil, you can definitely overdo it, so I'm just going to put a light coat on. Well, I think my camera cut out in the process of doing the lemon oil treatment, but I got everything on there and I've wiped off the excess. One thing to note is that I do tape off the neck pickup to try to keep some of the small little threads from the steel wool coming off and getting stuck down inside the pickups. You know, that's magnetic, so it has a tendency to attract those. And after the lemon oil treatment, the frets look good. The fretboard looks a little bit darker, which I actually like. I think though, you know, I was kind of flipping the guitar over and cleaning some things up, and some sawdust fell out from these post holes, and the sawdust was like a mahogany color. So it has me kind of curious, like what's inside here. So I think I'm going to do a little bit of disassembly before we put this thing back together and see what's inside. The simplest place to start is going to be this back cover. Let's just see what's under here. Well, under here it has I would say a full-size Gibson style switch. It's not one of those sort of cheap ones with the prongs on it. It actually has the real legit wafers, and it's mechanical switch. There's two full-size pots. They look kind of standard import, but at least they're full-size, and I'm sure they're 500K. They don't say anything on them, but there's just no way that they aren't. And there's this interesting little feature on this guitar, which is a tuner. It's a built-in tuner, and I'll show you that on the other side. It's on one of the pickup rings. So I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at the pickups. The neck pickup on this looks like it's got a resistance of 12.4K, and the bridge pickup is a pretty hot one. It's got a resistance of 16.2, 16.3K. So this is the little feature I was talking about with the tuner. Right here on the side of the bridge pickup, there's a little button, and there's some lights and whatnot you can see inside the ring of the pickup. And basically it's got a light for each one of the strings, and it's also got a light that indicates whether it's in tune, sharp, or flat. Next I'm going to have a quick look at what's in this pickup cavity. I want to see if I can tell anything about the wood, and also I want to see what kind of pickups it has. Well, I have to say I'm actually a little surprised by what I found here. So the pickup is a little bit different than the last Special 2 that I took apart. It says designed by Epiphone USA on the bottom of the pickup rather than just saying Epiphone. I mean, I can tell it's definitely foreign made, but you know, it's got some different markings. And what's really shocking to me is that this thing is solid wood. It looks like mahogany on the inside. Honestly, I'm not a wood expert by any means, but it definitely looks like a lot of the Les Pauls that I've seen in the past. And I'm really shocked by that. It does not look like it has a cap, so I don't think that this top is a real top. I think it's either some kind of really thin veneer or maybe not even real. So kind of hard to say. But it's definitely a very nice body compared to the 2005 Special 2 that I took apart. That was definitely plywood. Well, I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to take the neck off anyway, just because I'm going to do one more check and make sure that this body is solid wood. So here's the neck pocket. I guess you judge for yourself, but I think that thing is some kind of mahogany. This is a very thin veneer of whatever this, photo finish or whatever it is on top. And the binding is right there, all in one layer of wood, so there's no cap. There's a little bit of a sort of a shim placed in here, probably correcting some kind of a neck angle issue from the factory. Otherwise, everything in here looks really good. I'm just actually really shocked at the level of quality that you kind of see here in a really entry-level bolt-on neck guitar. So before I put things back together, I just thought I'd show a little bit of a close-up. The headstock has this slash logo on it. Les Paul Special 2 headstock, or truss rod cover rather. The tuners on them are not super great. They're just these stamped steel covers on these really cheap tuners with these giant heads. But what do you expect for an Epiphone entry-level guitar? The binding is really nice on the sides of the fretboard, but it does not cover the ends of the frets. So the ends of the frets come over the edge of the binding, which is not surprising because of the level of cost here. But the neck itself looks like a nice quality neck. I don't know what wood it is, but again, it looks like it's probably some kind of mahogany or something. It's, Chinese mahogany and American mahogany, not exactly the same species, I'm sure, but it does look like it's a nice neck. There may be a seam here at the back of the headstock, I can see now. So the headstock and the neck itself may be two pieces of wood. Okay, the neck's reinstalled. Let's get that bridge reinstalled. So the last Epiphone I took apart had a B2 style bridge, or at least it said B2 on the bottom. This one just says Epiphone on the bottom, but visually it looks exactly the same. It's got a retaining wire to hold these screws in, and these saddles are installed exactly the same. So I don't really think there's a difference. It's just maybe they changed the mold. So I'm putting the tailpiece back on with the strings already installed, if you'll remember. The tailpiece, I like to install it as low as possible to the body of the guitar so that it has the best angle over the strings, or over the bridge rather, but you don't want it to hit the back of the bridge with the string. So just make sure that you can get something under there, a piece of paper or something. This time I'm changing the winding of the strings so that they actually go the proper direction. But you know, if you want to know how far to, or at least how much slack to leave on your string so that you're going to have the proper number of wraps over your tuner, I usually just go about 2 inches. Gibson tuners are a little bit farther apart than Fender tuners, and you may have heard me say 2 tuners worth of distance before, but 2 inches is really about the right number. So go through the tuner peg itself, go about 2 inches more, back the string up that far, and start your winding from there. So that's the process. I'm going to do the rest of these off camera, but it's all the same way. These are used strings, so just make sure that if you're reusing used strings, you straighten out the bends as much as possible before you get them back installed. Okay, well the strings are on here. Let's get back to the issues at hand and start with neck relief. So capo at the 1st fret. Got my feeler gauge. Start out with 12 thousandths. Fret the guitar at the 17th here. It's got a little more relief than I would like. So I'm going to have to tighten that truss rod. Let me see exactly what it has in it, and then we'll go from there. Well, right now it's got about 22 thousandths of neck relief in it, roughly. So we need to take this truss rod cover off and start to adjust that. Alright, well, this takes a 4mm truss rod wrench. It took me a minute to find that. And it had absolutely no tension on the truss rod when I started, so then I snuck up on just a little bit of tension, and it actually brought it right really close into spec. It's right at about 12 thousandths, so I'm happy with that. Now we can move on to setting the action. Okay, so setting action on a Gibson is pretty easy. There's only 2 places to adjust it, kind of like a Floyd Rose. The Gibson spec for action is 5/64 on the bass side and 3/64 on the treble side. This is a graduated ruler. You can get them that measure in 64ths, you can get them that measure in inches, you can get them that measure in millimeters, or you can get one that does all 3. It's just in order to be accurate to Gibson, I just decided to use the 64th scale on this one. And I've set it, dialed it in pretty close. I'm probably a little bit under on the bass side, and that's okay with me. The main thing is you want to make sure that when you dial this in, you don't have any buzzing, and you really want to check up here on these high frets for sure, because this is where usually all the problems are with bad fret jobs. Make sure you hear every note. You also want to, just do every string like that. You also want to just make sure that your strings are not touching your bridge at the back edge. So you'll want to adjust your stop bar so that that's not happening, and just try to slip something under there like a piece of paper. I sometimes use an old piece of paper from a guitar string package. Slip it under there. It goes under there. You're all good. That will prevent any rattles, any buzzing. You got your strings set at the proper height, and you'll have less tuning issues if you fix this stop bar. One other thing I checked in terms of action is I checked the action at the 1st fret. You have to do that with a feeler gauge. That is there's actually a spec from Gibson on this, and I think it's like close to a 64th or something like that, but the main thing I try to check for is that I have at least 20 thousandths on the bass side and 18 thousandths on the treble side. The wound strings versus the unwound strings is what I'm talking about. And I guess there's some controversy over that. Some people have left me comments saying that they use 18 and 16. Some people said that they use 16 and 14. I personally think 14 is too low, but if you can get away with it, great. But the main thing you're looking for is you want these slots in the nut deep enough so that these strings are easy to fret. And I noticed when I was playing this thing a minute ago that it was a little bit different to chord in this middle area, and it turned out that these three, not the last one, but the B, the G, and the D, they are a little bit high. So I went in with my set of nut files and I slotted this nut a little bit deeper. The process is pretty simple, but I've got a video on that if you want to see it. It's all about nut slotting. It's one of my quick tips. So go see the quick tips series, and I think it's number 11, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, deepen those if they need it, and everything right now is playing in spec. I think the last thing I've got to do is pickup height. I've got a video on that too. It's a quick tip, but I'm going to go ahead and use a 4/64 spec, and I've got a little Allen wrench that I use to keep track of my height, and I will adjust these accordingly. Okay, so the process there is basically you fret the guitar at the last fret, and you measure that distance between the string and the pole piece, and I'm shooting for 4/64. I just happen to use an Allen wrench to do it, but there are multiple ways, and you want to make sure that you use the Allen wrench like a feeler gauge and just slip it in right between that pole piece and that string and make sure you've got the right distance. Don't forget, Allen wrenches are hex keys, so they're different dimensions depending on which way you turn them. So I always measure to find one that's 4/64 in the straight up and down direction, and then I keep it straight up and down while I'm doing my measurements. One of the last steps in any of my guitar setups is usually intonation, just to check it before the guitar goes out. Pretty simple to do. Basically what you're doing is comparing the harmonic at the 12th fret with the fretted note at the 12th fret. So you want to tune your harmonic first. Get it as close as you can. There's a lot of variance in cheap tuners. And then check your fretted note. And I'm a little bit sharp in this case, which means I need to lengthen the string. And it's different on Fender and Gibson. It's different on Gibson depending on which way you orient the screws. I've got the screws oriented towards the nut, so I need to loosen the screws to get a longer string. So I need to retune every time you adjust the saddle. And now I've got it right on the money. So you'll want to do that with every one of your strings. Usually what you'll end up with is sort of a backwards sort of ramp pattern, and the G will end up a little bit behind the D string. So keep going. That one's pretty much on. So was that. It might be just a hair out. But, you know, the slightest increments are what make this work. So you don't really have to turn the screws very much unless it's way off. And you'll know. Okay, so I got everything all in tune here and intonated, and that's really it. I think I'm pretty much done with this guitar, and I think it's ready for a new owner. So what's my verdict on this thing? I mean, it's a Les Paul Special, Epiphone obviously, or Special 2 technically. I think, you know, it's a bolt-on neck guitar. It's, you know, it's got decent materials from what I see. It's got a real solid wood body, decent little pickups, decent hardware, maybe minus the tuners. And, you know, overall I'd say this is a really great little guitar for a very beginner player. So Thanks for following along. I really appreciate you guys liking and commenting on my videos. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you like what I'm doing, and that way you'll get to see me regularly. Thanks a lot. See you guys later.